On the morning I agreed to marry my enemy, London looked like it was holding its breath. The Thames moved in a slow pewter ribbon under a sky the color of wet slate, and the city felt too quiet, like it had been asked to keep a secret. I stood in the kitchen of my childhood flat in Southwark, palms pressed to the chilly countertop, listening to the kettle scream and my mother cough behind the closed door of her bedroom. The sound had become a metronome in my life. 3 sharp coughs, a pause, a softer one that always made my stomach knot. I stared at the dried tea stain on the wall as if it might rearrange itself into an answer. It didn't. Nothing did. That was the problem. I'd run out of answers. The text from my brother had come at 6:02 a.m., their usual time for bad news, because he thought early hours softened the blow. It didn't. Bailiffs came again. We've got 2 weeks. Mum can't move. Dad's pension is frozen. I'm sorry, Elle. I don't know what to do. I did. Or, at least I knew what I was about to do, which isn't quite the same. I turned the kettle off before it boiled over, poured water into 2 cups even though my father didn't drink tea anymore, and carried the tray down the hall. The carpet had a thin patch by the bathroom door where I'd tripped at age 9 and cried in a melodramatic heap. The patch was still there, a bruise in the floor that never healed, which felt appropriate. I knocked softly and slipped into my parents' room. My mother was upright, propped on pillows that were flattened from years of faithful duty. She had a scarf wrapped around her head even indoors, a habit from her chemo days that never left, and her eyes were bright in the way sick people's eyes can be, too alive for a body that feels like it's failing. She smiled when she saw me, as if I were bringing her something indulgent and not just tea. My father sat by the window, a man carved out of old anger, the kind that doesn't roar, just settles like dust on all your belongings. He watched the street below with the grim patience of someone waiting for a train that never arrives. "Mornin', love," Mum said. Her voice was thin but warm. "Morning," I said, putting the tray on her lap. I set 1 cup on the sill near Dad. He didn't touch it. Oliver texted, Mum added quietly, like she'd heard the buzz and the words had floated through the wall. I didn't flinch. There was no point pretending. Yeah. Dad turned slightly, not toward me, but far enough that I could feel the edge of his attention. 2 weeks, he said at last. We sat with that number between us like a 3rd cup on the tray, steaming and impossible to drink. 2 weeks was the amount of time you gave someone when you were trying to be kind about a cruelty. 2 weeks to leave. 2 weeks before the lock changed on the door where I'd learned to ride a bike in the courtyard, where Mum had hung washing on a Saturday, where Dad had once carried me upstairs on his shoulders after I fell asleep on the sofa. 2 weeks before they'd take the flat and sell it off to someone who would paint the walls white and call the neighborhood up and coming like it hadn't been my whole family's history. What can we do? Mum asked, already knowing the answer, but hoping for a gentler one. I hated that hope more than anything. Hope was expensive. It had cost my family too much already. I'll handle it, I said. Dad's laugh was short and humorless. You're a nurse, Eleanor, he said, using my full name only when he wanted distance. Not a magician. Not a banker. What are you going to handle? I set my jaw. I'm meeting someone today. Mum's eyes flicked to mine.
She knew me too well.
She knew when I was lying, but she also knew when I was choosing not to tell the whole truth. Meeting who? Just someone who might help. Dad stood abruptly, the cheap chair legs scraping the floor. Help for what? For the bailiffs? For the debt? For your mother's care? He spun toward me now, and for a second I saw the old Dad, the one who used to bellow at referees during Oliver's matches, who yelled because he felt powerless and didn't know what to do with it. Help doesn't appear out of thin air. It comes with a price. A trap. It's not a trap. He looked at me with something like pity and something like fear. Everything is a trap when you're desperate. Maybe he was right. Desperation had been circling us for months, hungry and clever. It was the kind of animal you couldn't outrun. You could only distract it with a sacrifice. I didn't say that part aloud. I kissed Mum's forehead, ignored the way Dad's eyes followed me like a warning, and left before I lost my nerve. Outside, I walked fast, the way I always did when I didn't want the city to catch up with me. It was a habit I'd learned at 17, The summer things went wrong for the first time. Back then I had gone to the University of Manchester on a scholarship, so proud I could barely breathe. Dad had hugged me too hard in the doorway and said, "Make us proud, Ellie."
I did.
I became a nurse. I worked double shifts. When Mum got sick, I moved home. When the bills piled up, I picked up overtime. When Dad's pension froze because of a bureaucratic error and no one cared enough to fix it, I argued with strangers over the phone until my throat hurt. None of it had been enough. Not even close. The meeting was in Canary Wharf because of course it was. Glass towers and polished shoes, and a kind of money that looked down on the rest of London like it was a charming but inconvenient aunt. The lobby of the building smelled like citrus cleaner and authority. I checked in with a receptionist who didn't smile and rode an elevator to the 38th floor, watching the numbers blink upward like a countdown. The doors opened onto a hall lined with framed abstract art that probably cost more than my annual salary. At the end, a woman in a fitted navy dress gestured me in without a word. I stepped into the office and felt my pulse trip. Nathaniel Hart was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, hands in his pockets, looking out at the river like he owned it. He was taller than I remembered, or maybe I was shorter from exhaustion. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, the kind of controlled posture that made you think even his breathing followed a schedule. He turned as I entered, and his expression didn't change except for the faintest lift of one eyebrow in a gesture that used to make my teeth grind. "Eleanor Brooks," he said, "you're punctual. Don't make a habit of calling me punctual like it's a compliment," I replied, because the old animosity was muscle memory. "You asked to meet early. Sit." I stayed standing. "You wanted to talk." "Talk." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, almost not. "We really haven't changed, have we?" "No," I said. "You still think you're the only adult in every room. And you still think stubbornness is a personality." We stared at each other with 10 years of history buried between us, like a minefield. It was a ridiculous history, really. We'd been children when it started, which should have made it easier to outgrow. But there are some rivalries that aren't about the first spark at all. They're about what it sets on fire. Nathan and I had gone to St. Jude's Grammar together. He was the scholarship kid with a mother who cleaned offices and a brain that felt like a weapon. I was the girl with a dad who was out of work, a mum who could sew miracles on a budget, and a stubborn streak that made teachers sigh. We'd been top of our class, both of us, and we'd learned early that there was only room for one. Teachers compared us. Boys asked which of us would get into Oxford. Girls decided I must be cold and he must be arrogant, and they weren't wrong. We competed for grades, for debate trophies, for the one seat in the student council that mattered. It wasn't a gentle competition. It was war with exam papers instead of bullets. The worst of it happened in sixth form. We'd both applied for a prestigious Cambridge summer program, one slot per school. I'd wanted it like oxygen. Dad had just lost another job. Mum was working nights. I'd told myself I needed to win, no matter what. I remember Nathan looking at me in the library, his jaw clenched, and saying, "You'll never get out if you don't stop fighting everyone like they're the reason you're stuck." I'd spat back, "Maybe if you weren't so busy pretending you're better than all of us, someone would actually want to help you." He got the slot. I didn't. I found out later he'd made a case for himself with a teacher who hated me after I'd corrected her in class. I never forgave him. I don't even know if he'd done anything wrong. Envy doesn't look for fairness. It looks for someone to blame. We'd gone our separate ways after graduation, but London had a way of folding people back into each other. Nathan became a hedge fund prodigy, the kind newspapers called a shark in a tailored suit. I became a nurse. I saw his name on billboards for Harrow and Heart Capital. He saw mine on none at all. We bumped into each other at charity events where I was pouring wine to raise money for hospitals he was donating to for tax breaks. We exchanged the same barbed smiles every time. And now I was in his office, because desperation makes you do humiliating math. He moved to his desk and opened a folder like he was beginning a meeting with a client, not a former classmate who still annoyed him enough to stand. "Your family situation is grim," he said. The bluntness hit like a slap. "You didn't bring me here for sympathy." "No," he laced his fingers. I brought you here because we have a mutual interest in solving it. I finally sat, mostly because my legs felt shaky. Explain. You need money. A lot of it. Quickly. The debt your father owes is tied to a property development loan. The lender is not known for patience. If the flat is seized, your mother's care becomes unstable and your father becomes homeless. He said it like he was reading weather. You do not have the income to settle this debt yourself. You have exhausted all charitable routes. I know because my firm sometimes monitors risk in community lending, and your family's file is flagged. I stared. You've been monitoring my family? His gaze stayed steady. Don't flatter yourself. We monitor thousands of files. Yours crossed my desk because your father's lender is a client, and the flat is in a target postcode. I recognized your name. Why didn't you tell me? You would have taken it as a threat. I hated that he was right. He slid a paper across the desk. There is an alternative. I looked down. The header was crisp, legal, the kind of font that smelled like courtroom air. Proposed agreement at the top. My throat tightened. What is this? A marriage contract. I laughed once, sharp and loud. You're joking. I don't joke about business, he said, and the way he said business made my laughter die fast. You want to marry me? I want a wife.
He paused.
You, specifically. That's a terrible pitch. He didn't react to the insult. Harrows and Hart is negotiating a merger with a U.S. firm in New York. The partners are traditional. They want stability in leadership, a certain appearance. It's archaic, but it's their condition for placing me as the UK-based managing director of the new entity. I need a spouse before the final vote. Then find someone who likes you. His eyes narrowed slightly, the only crack in his calm. I'm not looking for lantern-lit romance. I'm looking for a partner who won't turn this into gossip. Someone educated, controlled, and willing to sign a confidentiality clause. Someone who already knows the stakes of appearing composed. You think I'm composed? More than most people I know, he said. Even when you're furious. I should have walked out. I should have thrown the contract in his smug face. But my brain was doing numbers faster than my pride could protest. How much did we owe? How much did we need? How long before Mum's coughing became something worse? How many shifts could I work before my body snapped? What do I get out of it? I asked, voice quiet. He opened another folder and slid a bank document across the desk. The full settlement of your father's debt. A trust set up for your mother's ongoing care. A legal guarantee of housing for your parents, regardless of any future financial fluctuation. And a personal stipend commensurate with the role. My mouth went dry. It was like someone offering you oxygen when you'd been drowning and asking you to pretend it was just water. How long? I forced out.
2 years, he said.
Public marriage. Private discretion. You attend a few events, live with me part-time for optics. After 2 years, if the merger is stable, we divorce amicably. There's an exit clause if either of us breaches the agreement. This is insane. It's pragmatic. It's exploitation. He leaned back. Is it? I'm offering you a choice. You can refuse. Your moral superiority will keep you warm on the pavement. The cruelty of the sentence made my eyes sting. I gripped the contract until my knuckles hurt. You don't have to say it like that. I do, he said softly. Because otherwise you'll pretend this is about ego. It's not. It's about reality. I looked at him, the boy I hated, the man I didn't understand. I expected triumph in his face. I expected pity. There was neither. Just something like tired determination, as if he'd hated himself for making this offer but made it anyway. Why me? I asked again, slower this time. Of everyone you could choose. His gaze flicked away for the first time, out toward the shards of London skyline. You don't scare easily, he said. And you won't fall in love with me. The certainty in his voice landed with a strange weight. I could. The words slipped out before I could stop them, almost sarcastic, almost not. He looked at me, then really looked, and the air changed. Could you? My pulse stumbled.
No.
Good. He slid a pen closer. Then this stays simple. Simple. Like surgery was simple. Like breaking a bone to set it right. I took the pen, then set it down. My hands shook. If I do this, there are conditions. Name them. My parents must not know the details. I won't humiliate them. They'll think it's real. At least for now. He nodded. Agreed. You don't get to control my work.
I keep my job.
I'm not your decorative accessory. Agreed, he said again. And if at any moment this becomes unsafe for me, emotionally or otherwise, I walk. His jaw tightened. Not in anger. In recognition. Agreed. I won't trap you. The irony of that nearly made me smile. Nearly. And one more thing. What? If you ever throw that line about moral superiority at me again, I will leak your teenage poetry to the tabloids. Something like a laugh escaped him, brief and surprised. You remember that? Regrettably. Then I accept. I stared at the contract for a long moment, listening to the hum of the building, the city below, my mother's cough in my mind. I signed before I let myself think of the consequences, because thinking would have killed me. Nathan added his signature below mine with a firm, practiced hand. There was no ring, no kiss, no romantic nonsense. Just ink, binding us like a business deal. Like a bargain with the devil. Except the devil was a man who looked like he'd been born in a boardroom. He stood and offered his hand. I hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, steady. Congratulations, Mrs. Hart, he said. The name felt like a coat I'd put on in the wrong size. Heavy in the shoulders, too long in the sleeves.
Don't get used to it, I said.
His eyes glinted. Oh, Eleanor. You'll be surprised what people get used to. The wedding was 5 weeks later, because rich people can make reality move fast. Nathan's PR team called it a quiet but tasteful ceremony, which translated to a registered event at a historic townhouse in Chelsea, with enough flowers to make the air smell like a greenhouse. My parents came dressed in their best, my father stiff in a suit that used to fit, my mother radiant in a pale blue dress she'd insisted on altering herself. Oliver came too, eyes wide as if he couldn't believe I'd pulled this out of thin air. I hated that he thought it was magic. I hated that, for a moment, I wished it were. The press was there, but only the kind Nathan allowed: glossy business magazines, society pages, a photographer from the Financial Times. No screaming tabloids. We posed on the steps with London's gold afternoon light in our eyes. Nathan's hand rested at the small of my back like it belonged there. My smile was real enough to set someone's suspicions to sleep. Inside, the vows were short. Nathan's voice didn't shake, mine barely did. The registrar asked if we took each other to be lawful wedded spouses. I said yes, because my mother was looking at me like I'd given her the world. Nathan said yes because he never said no to a deal that benefited him. We signed again. We kissed for the cameras. His lips were soft and cool and careful. When he pulled away, his eyes stayed on mine for half a beat longer than necessary, and something unhelpful fluttered in my chest. Afterward, at the reception, people said lovely things about destiny and happiness. Nathan's colleagues toasted to partnership and new chapters. My father shook Nathan's hand and said, gruffly, "Take care of her." Nathan replied, "Always," like it was a promise he'd made to himself. I stood beside them, feeling like a ghost at my own life. By 9, I was exhausted from smiling, from the constant awareness of being watched, from the way my mother kept squeezing my fingers with a brightness that broke my heart. When the last guests filtered out and my parents left in a hired car Nathan insisted on paying for, I finally let my shoulders drop. Nathan found me in a quiet hallway lined with portraits of solemn men who all looked a bit like him. "You did well," he said. "Thanks for the performance review." That wasn't sarcasm. It threw me. I didn't know what to do with sincerity from him. It felt like a foreign language I hadn't studied. "Where are we going now?" I asked. "To the penthouse," he said. "We'll need a few photos as newlyweds returning home." "Of course." I couldn't keep the bitterness out. His gaze sharpened. "You regret it?" "No," I lied. "I just hate being a product." "We both are," he said quietly. "Mine just sells for more." That was the first time he said something that sounded like loneliness. It startled me into silence. The penthouse was in a glass tower near the river. It was nothing like my family flat. It smelled of wood and clean linen, and everything had a place that wasn't improvised. The living room was a restrained ocean of grays and creams. A piano sat unused in one corner like an art piece. The kitchen island was bigger than my parents' whole kitchen. There were bookshelves full of hardbacks that looked both expensive and actually read. A photographer met us in the lobby and snapped a few shots in the elevator, then in the doorway, then politely left. Nathan closed the door behind him and leaned his forehead against it for a second, eyes closed. The gesture was so human it caught me off guard. "You okay?" I heard myself ask. He opened his eyes. "Fine. You look like you just ran a marathon."
I did.
"I'm simply better at hiding the blisters." I nodded, not sure why that sentence made me want to laugh. "Right." He gestured down the hallway. "Your room is on the left. Mine is at the end. There's no expectation tonight." I blinked. Expectation. He looked at me like I was being naive on purpose. "You're tired, Eleanor. Not everything we do needs to be an act." I exhaled slowly, realizing I'd been holding my breath since the ceremony. "Thanks. Don't thank me for being professional." I wasn't. I was thanking you for not being a jerk. His mouth twitched. "I'm not a jerk. I'm an acquired taste." "Oh," I said, stepping past him. "Trust me, I've acquired plenty." In my room, I closed the door and leaned against it, heart racing for no good reason. The bed was huge, the sheets soft. There was a balcony overlooking the river where lights slid over the water like spilled jewelry. I took off my shoes and finally let the quiet settle around me. I should have felt relief. I did, sort of. I also felt the sharp edge of a different feeling, the kind that comes when you jump off a cliff and only then realize you didn't check the height. I changed into a t-shirt and leggings and padded out to the kitchen for water. Nathan was there, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, pouring 2 glasses like he'd anticipated me. "Hydration for the hostage," he said, passing me one. "Cute," I said, taking it. "Do you always defuse tension with jokes? How else do you survive?" He sipped his water. "You are good with your parents. They deserve good things." My voice caught. I cleared it. "They think this is love, you know." "I know. Do you feel guilty?" He considered. "I feel responsible. There's a difference." "Is there?" I asked.
Yes.
Guilt implies I did something wrong. Responsibility means I'm aware of what I've done. I studied him. "That's a very Nathan way to say you don't care." "I care," he said simply. "I just don't let it make decisions for me." "I do," I said before I could stop myself. He looked at me again with that controlled focus. "That's why you're a nurse. And why you're here." I bristled. "I'm here because my family needed help. Not because of my personality resume." He didn't argue. He just nodded, like he'd learned when to let me be angry. The silence stretched. Outside, a siren wailed distantly, then faded. "I can sleep if you want," I said, pushing my glass aside.
"Go," he said.
"Tomorrow will be busy."
It was.
Not in the dramatic way I dreaded, but in a parade of normalities that were new to me. Morning coffee together for optics. A call with his team where I had to sit in the background and smile when I was introduced as my wife, Eleanor. A lunch with a UK partner where I had to laugh at a joke about golf. A fitting for a charity gala dress. A crash course in the schedule of a man who ran his life like a well-funded campaign. I kept my job. That was my anchor. Leaving the penthouse at 6:30 a.m. in my scrubs felt like stepping back into myself. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and microwave tuna and real life. Patients didn't care who I'd married. They cared that I held their hand when the floor hurt, that I listened when they were scared, that I spoke to them like they were still people even while they were wearing paper gowns.
I needed that.
Nathan never interfered. If anything, he respected my hours more than I did. When my shift ran late, there was a message. "Car downstairs. Don't argue." When I staggered home after a particularly rough night, there was soup in the fridge, simple and warm. The first time I found it, I thought maybe a housekeeper had left it. Then I saw a sticky note in his neat handwriting. You forget to eat when you're stressed.
Don't.
I stared at it for a long time, confused by the tenderness that didn't fit my idea of him. We lived like parallel lines at first, crossing sometimes, never blending. We had breakfast together most days because it was efficient. We went to events together at night because it was required. In public, he touched my back, my arm, my waist with cues subtle enough to look intimate but measured enough to feel safe. In private, we spoke with sharp honesty that neither of us could manage for anyone else. My family flourished in the money I'd sold myself for. Mom started a new treatment plan with a specialist Nathan funded. The trust covered home care, so Oliver didn't have to take second jobs. Dad's pension issue got resolved mysteriously fast, a phone call from someone important making a bureaucrat suddenly eager to help. I watched my mother's color return, my father's shoulders loosen, and I tried not to think about the price tag hanging from my ring. The problem was, the ring started to feel less like a shackle and more like something else. Something I didn't want to name. It happened in small treacheries. The way Nathan listened when I spoke, real listening, not the kind people perform. The way he never interrupted unless he had a question worth asking. The way he brought me back a book I'd mentioned wanting to reread in passing, without making a fuss. The way he stayed up late the night I came home shaking after losing a patient my age, sitting silently on the sofa beside me, offering a cup of tea without trying to fix what couldn't be fixed. We didn't talk much that night, but his presence felt like a steady wall against the grief. Why are you being nice? I asked once, half a joke, half terrified. He didn't look up from the cutting board where he was slicing lemons for dinner. Is that what you think this is? I think you're not supposed to be rewriting your character arc. He paused, knife midair, then said quietly, maybe you never knew my character. That's not fair, I snapped. We knew each other for years. We knew each other in a war zone, he said. That's not the same as knowing someone. His words lodged under my ribs. I wanted to argue. I couldn't find the lie. Some nights, after events, we'd come home and collapse into the living room, shoes kicked off, ties loosened, and we'd talk more honestly than we ever had as teenagers. About school, about ambition, about how the world seemed to reward people who could pretend they didn't care. Nathan told me about his mother, how she'd scrubbed office floors so he could keep up with kids who had tutors, how she died 2 years after he started making real money, never getting to see the mansion she'd earned with her lungs. I told him about Dad's pride, Mom's resilience, about how being the first in my family to go to uni felt like carrying a glass bowl full of water across a shaking bridge. You were always so angry, I said one night after a gala. We'd taken off the masks, and the apartment felt like ours in a strange, borrowed way. At school. At me. He rested his head back against the sofa. I was afraid. Of what? Losing, he said softly. And then when I started winning, I was afraid of what it meant. That I'd become someone I didn't like. You don't like yourself? I asked, startled. He looked at me, a shadow in his eyes. Do you? I opened my mouth, closed it. The honest answer was complicated. We stared at each other in the low light. The city outside glittered like it was trying to distract us. I swallowed. Sometimes I think you're the most infuriating man on this island. He smiled faintly. Sometimes? And sometimes, I added, almost whispering, I think you're kinder than you want people to know. His breath hitched. It was so small I might have imagined it, but I didn't think I did. Careful, Eleanor, he murmured. Compliments are dangerous. Why? Because I might start believing you. I rolled my eyes to hide the way my heart lurched. Don't get dramatic. I'm not dramatic, he said. I'm precise. Right. Like a scalpel. Exactly. Scalpels cut people open, I said, aiming for a light tone. He leaned closer, elbows on his knees. Sometimes that's the only way to save them. The air between us felt charged, like a storm about to break. I stood abruptly. I'm going to bed. Good night, he said, but his voice was rough. In my room, I pressed a hand to my chest and tried to ignore the truth I was building like a tower I didn't want to climb. Nathan fell first. I saw it before he said anything because I'm a nurse and I notice patterns. The way his eyes followed me when I wasn't looking. The way he looked almost disappointed when I made plans that didn't include him, then corrected himself. The way he started asking questions about my day that weren't polite but curious. The way he'd step slightly closer in quiet rooms, like his body had forgotten our rules. The way he used my name sometimes without teasing, just soft and familiar. I told myself it was just convenience, a man getting used to a partner. I told myself it was because he was good at performing intimacy and had practiced enough to make it seem real. I told myself it was nothing. Then came New York. The merger summit was held at a hotel overlooking Central Park, the kind of place that makes you feel underdressed even in silk. We flew in on a Sunday because Nathan wanted a day before meetings to reset to their clock. I'd taken leave from the hospital and packed a suitcase full of dresses I wasn't sure I could carry. The U.S. partners were polite in a razor-sharp way. Their wives kissed my cheek and asked about London like they'd read a brochure and were testing me. The men shook Nathan's hand and clapped him on the shoulder, calling him Nate, after 5 minutes like a claim. I smiled through brunches and cocktail hours, through a Broadway show I was too nervous to enjoy, through the constant feeling of being evaluated like a product on a shelf. On the third night, after the final presentation, there was a dinner in a private room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a pianist playing something expensive and sad. Toasts were made. Contracts were celebrated. Nathan's lead partner, an older man named Russell, leaned over to me with a grin that smelled like whiskey. "Your husband's a hell of a closer," he said. "We were worried he might be too singular. But a good woman rounds a man out, you know? Makes him stable." I sipped my wine to stop myself from choking on my anger. "What makes you think he needed rounding out?" Russell laughed. "Oh, come on. Men like him don't learn softness unless there's someone worth being soft for." I glanced at Nathan across the table. He had heard. I saw it in the way his jaw tightened. He met my eyes briefly, and there was a flicker there, something private. Something that wasn't for Russell. Later, in the elevator up to our suite, the tension finally broke. "Do they ever stop talking about women like we're accessories?" I burst out. Nathan exhaled slowly.
No.
"Not in rooms where they think we can't hear the contempt." I wanted to pour my drink on his shoes. "I noticed. And you didn't stop me." "You didn't need stopping." He looked at me with a steadiness that made my throat tighten. "You were right." The elevator doors opened. We stepped into the suite, the city beyond the window a blaze of neon. I kicked off my heels and let myself sink onto the sofa. Nathan loosened his tie, then took a drink from the minibar, then thought better of it and put it back. "Are you okay?" he asked.
Fine.
"Just tired of being perceived." "I understand." I huffed a laugh. "Do you?" "Yes." His voice was so low and sure that it quieted the storm in me. I looked up at him. He stood near the window, backlit by New York's glow, his suit jacket off, sleeves rolled. He looked less like a shark and more like a man who had been holding his breath for months. "What?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. He crossed the room, slow enough to give me every chance to stop him, and sat on the coffee table opposite me. His knees were inches from mine. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. My stomach dipped. "Is this about the contract? Did something go wrong?" "No," he swallowed. "It's about us." "There is no us, Nathan." I meant it as a defense. It sounded like a wound. His eyes didn't leave mine. "I know that's what we agreed." Then, "Eleanor." He said my name like he was setting it down carefully. "I fell in love with you." The words were so plain, so un-Nathan, that for a moment I just stared. "No, you didn't," I said finally, because denial is easier than fear. "Yes," he said softly. "I did. This is the part where you're supposed to be cold and calculated. I'm capable of being more than one thing." I stood up because sitting felt too intimate. "Nathan, you can't. We can't. There's a contract. 2 years. A plan." "I'm aware of the paperwork." His mouth twitched in something that hurt to see. "I'm also aware that none of it predicted how you'd look at my mother's photo on the mantel like she mattered to you. Or how you come home from work exhausted and still ask me if I've eaten. Or how you fight for people who aren't useful to you." I crossed my arms. "That's not love. That's admiration." Gratitude. Habit. Maybe. He rose too, closing the distance without touching me. But it feels like love to me. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm tired of lying to you, he said. And because I don't want to trap you with silence. You deserve to know what's in the room. The fact he brought up trapping again made my chest ache. I turned away, staring out the window at the rippling lights of traffic far below. This is a mistake. Maybe. But it's mine to make. You're going to ruin everything, I whispered. If you act like this, people will think it's real. My parents.
The press. Me.
A beat of silence. Is that what scares you? He asked quietly. That they'll think it's real?
Or that it is.
I spun to glare at him. Don't do that. Do what? Make this about me. My voice shook. You can't just decide to love someone because it's inconveniently poetic. He flinched slightly. I didn't decide. It happened. I tried to stop it. I'm very good at stopping things I don't want. So, why didn't you stop this? He looked at me like the answer was something he was ashamed of. Because I didn't want to. My heart did something stupid. I pressed my palms to my eyes. Nathan. Tell me to shut up, and I will, he said gently. Tell me you want distance, and I'll give it. I'm not asking for anything tonight. I'm just telling the truth. I lowered my hands. He wasn't moving, wasn't reaching for me, wasn't trying to seal his confession with a kiss. He just stood there, open in a way that felt almost dangerous. Why now? I asked. Because tomorrow I sign the merger. And once I do, the world will believe this marriage is rooted in love. I needed you to know that for me it isn't a lie anymore. The air went thin. I felt pinned between two truths, the one I'd built to survive, and the one he'd just placed in my hands. I can't give you what you want, I said hoarsely. I know. I'm not in love with you. He nodded, but his eyes dimmed like a light in a hallway. I know. Then why say it? Because I thought you should have the choice to step back if my feelings make this unsafe for you. He took a breath. And because you deserve to be loved without it being a bargain. I was furious at him for being noble. I was furious at myself for wanting to melt. I walked past him toward my room. Eleanor, he called softly. I stopped, hand on the doorframe. If you ever find this unbearable, he said, voice steady, I will pay every penalty in the contract to let you go. I will take the scandal. I will take the fall. I turned slowly. Why? Because I fell first, he said simply. And that means the consequence is mine. Something in me cracked. Not enough to flood everything, but enough for a few dangerous drops. Good night, I whispered. Good night, love. He said love like a habit he'd had forever. I slept badly. I woke up with the confession lodged in my chest like a stone. I walked through the signing ceremony the next day with a smile that felt painted on, all while my mind replayed his words in a loop. I watched him shake hands with men who saw him as an asset, and I felt a strange, sharp protectiveness. I told myself it was gratitude. I told myself it was duty. Back in London, I tried to re-establish the old lines. I was polite. I was distant. I talked about schedules, not feelings. Nathan respected the boundary with a grace that made me want to scream. He didn't bring up New York. He didn't sulk. If anything, he became even more careful about giving me room. It was like standing in a ballroom with someone who'd learned your dance steps and refused to step on your toes even if you wanted him close. That's the cruelest part about someone falling in love with you when you can't catch them. They make it easy to look away.
Weeks passed like that.
Autumn turned London into copper and smoke. Mum continued improving. Dad started making jokes again, the kind that were so bad, they were almost sweet. Oliver got accepted into a training program for electricians, something he'd wanted for years, but never had the stability to pursue. My family was blooming because of the money and because, in their eyes, I'd found happiness. Every time Mum asked, "How's Nathan treating you, sweetheart?" I had to swallow guilt like a vitamin. One Sunday, Mum invited us for lunch. I'd offered to cook, but she insisted. She'd been determined to reclaim her kitchen, to prove sickness hadn't stolen all her authority. Nathan came with me, carrying a bottle of wine and a ridiculous bouquet of sunflowers that made my mother beam. He wore a sweater instead of a suit, and it made him look younger, less armored. Mum fussed over him like she'd always wanted another son. Dad watched him with wary respect. Oliver was mostly dazzled by the idea of billionaire adjacency and kept asking Nathan about markets like he could absorb wealth via osmosis. I sat at the table watching it all, feeling like I was watching a play where I'd forgotten my lines. After dessert, Mum went to lie down, tired but smiling. Dad dozed in his chair with the football on low. Oliver took a call in the hallway. That left Nathan and me in the kitchen, rinsing plates side by side. "You're good with them," I said quietly. He shrugged slightly. "They're your family. That makes them important. You didn't have to do this. Come, pretend with them." He turned off the tap. "I'm not pretending with them." My stomach tightened. "Nathan, I'm serious." His voice was calm. "They deserve sincerity. And so do you." I gripped the edge of the sink. "I told you I can't." "I'm not asking you to return anything," he interrupted gently. "I'm just saying that being here isn't a hardship." "That's not what I meant." His eyes searched mine. "Then what did you mean?" I couldn't answer, because the truth was a knot I didn't want to untie. If I did, I might find out it wasn't only his confession living in my chest. It was mine too, unsaid and growing teeth. Oliver walked back in, breaking the moment. "Nathan, mate, can you help me with Dad? He's been getting letters again from some credit thing. I can't parse it." Nathan glanced at me, a silent question. "Please," I said. They went into the living room, and I stayed in the kitchen, wiping already clean counters. Their voices drifted toward me. Oliver worried, Nathan precise and patient. I heard Nathan say, "No, that clause is standard. It doesn't mean he owes more. It's to restructure the schedule. I'll call the solicitor on Monday." He sounded calm, no hint of annoyance at being asked to help with something so far outside his world. A minute later, I heard Dad's gravelly voice crack. "I never asked for charity." Nathan answered softly enough that I had to lean closer to hear. "This isn't charity. It's family." I froze. My throat went tight. Family. The word should have been a polite metaphor. It didn't sound like one the way he said it. On the ride home, the cab quieted around us. I touched the ring on my finger, absent-mindedly turning it. Nathan watched the passing streets. "They're doing better," he said. "Because of you." "Because of us," he corrected. I let out a breath that turned into a laugh without humor. "Don't romanticize it." "I'm not.
I mean it." He looked at me.
"You chose this to save them. That takes a kind of courage I've never had to summon. You had different battles." He nodded slowly.
"Yes."
"I did." Silence again. Then, carefully, he said, "Eleanor, I want to make something clear." I braced. "What?" "You don't owe me affection because I helped your family." His voice was steady. "You don't owe me love because I feel it. If you never feel anything, that's okay." My chest hurt. "Why are you so reasonable about this?" He smiled faintly, sadly. "Because I know what it's like to want something from someone who can't give it. And because if I ever pressure you, then whatever happens between us becomes another bargain. I don't want that." "What do you want?" He thought. "I want you safe. I want you free. And selfishly, I want to be around you as long as you'll allow it." I looked out the window so he couldn't see the shine in my eyes. "You're making this hard." "I'm sorry. Don't apologize for existing." I snapped, then softened. "Just stop being so good. You're ruining the whole enemy thing." His laugh was quiet and genuine. "I'll try to be more diabolical." "Please do." But he didn't. And I didn't want him to, which was the other problem. The turning point came on a night when grief and exhaustion met in the middle and decided to use me as a playground. I was on a late shift. A man in his 40s came in with acute respiratory failure, and by the time the doctor called it, the man's wife was screaming into his chest like she could shout him back to life. I had to walk her to a quiet room. I had to explain paperwork with a voice that didn't shake. I had to do all the things nurses do, be a bridge between someone and the worst day of their life. When I finally clocked out, my hands were numb. I got into the car Nathan had sent and stared at my reflection in the dark window. My eyes looked older than 28. My face felt like a mask I'd forgotten to take off. When I walked into the penthouse, the lights were low. Nathan was in the living room, laptop closed, tie loosened, waiting. He stood immediately. "Bad night?" he asked softly. I nodded once. My throat wouldn't work. He didn't ask for details. He opened his arms, not moving forward, just offering. It was a question, not a claim. I should have walked past him. I should have gone to my room and shut the door. I should have protected the line. Instead, I stepped into him. His arms came around me carefully at first, then tighter when I let out a shaky breath. I pressed my face into his shoulder. He smelled like soap and a faint cedar cologne I'd begun to associate with home in ways that scared me. "I'm here," he murmured. I nodded again because if I spoke, I'd break apart. He held me until the shaking passed, until my breathing found rhythm again. His hand rubbed slow circles on my back in a way that felt like he'd learned it by instinct, not practice. When I pulled back, he didn't let go entirely. His hands stayed on my arms, steadying. "Tea?" he asked, voice gentle. He led me to the sofa, made tea without asking how I took it because he already knew, and sat beside me, leaving just enough space for me to breathe. We drank in silence. After a while, I said quietly, "You shouldn't be this good to me." He looked at me like it was the strangest sentence.
Why?
Because this was supposed to be pretend.
His gaze softened.
I don't know how to be pretend with you anymore. My heart thudded hard. I set my cup down with hands that weren't steady. "Nathan." He didn't move. He didn't touch me. He just waited, like he'd made peace with whatever I said next. "I think," my voice failed. I swallowed. "I think I'm in trouble." His brow drew together. "Trouble? With you?" I laughed breathlessly, because saying it out loud was terrifying. "With whatever this is." He went utterly still. "Eleanor, you don't have to." "I know." I stared at my hands. "That's the problem. I don't have to, but I might anyway." The silence after that was huge. He looked like a man who'd been holding a fragile thing and was afraid to breathe near it. "Do you mean," he started, then stopped. "I don't know what I mean," I admitted. "I just know it's not nothing anymore." He nodded once, slow. Okay. I repeated, half relieved, half annoyed. "That's it. What do you want me to say?" "I want you to, I don't know." I rubbed my forehead. "I hate this. I hate that you fell in love with me, and instead of making it easier, you made it safer. Now I can't even blame you." He studied me, then said with a quiet kind of wonder, "I'd rather you blame me than hurt alone." "Well, congratulations," I muttered. "You've upgraded from enemy to complication." His mouth curved. "I'll take it." I looked at him. Really looked. The boy I'd competed with. The man I'd bargained with. The person who'd held me when I was falling apart. "Why did you fall for me?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Because you're stubbornly kind," he said simply. "Because you show up even when you're tired. Because you don't think power makes someone valuable. Because you scare me in the best ways." He hesitated. "Because you see through me. And you stayed anyway." "I didn't stay for you." "I know," he said softly. "And that's why it mattered." My eyes stung. I blinked it back. "I'm scared." "I know. Of what if this becomes real? Of what if you stop being you? Of what if I stop being me?" He nodded slowly. "Then we take it slowly. We don't need a grand story. We just need honesty." "But the contract." "Paper doesn't control people," he said. "It only tries to predict them." I let out a wet breath. "You're terrible at romance." "Good. I'd rather be terrible and real." My laugh came with tears. "God, that's annoying." He smiled, and there was something tender and disbelieving in it, like he'd found a door he didn't know existed. He didn't reach for me. He didn't ask for a kiss. He just let the moment be what it was. Raw, uncertain, alive. After that night, nothing flipped like a switch. It was more like the tide turned without either of us noticing until we were walking on wet sand that had been dry. We still had public duties. We still had private boundaries. But the air between us shifted. We lingered in doorways. We sat closer on the sofa. We shared more silence that didn't feel strained. When he brushed past me in the kitchen, his hand sometimes grazed mine by accident, and I didn't pull away. It was slow.
It was terrifying.
It was the most honest thing I'd ever done. One evening in late November, we attended a charity ball at the Natural History Museum. The hall was lit in warm amber, dinosaurs looming overhead like ancient witnesses to modern nonsense. I wore a deep green dress that made me feel like someone I might have been in another life. Nathan wore a black suit that fit him like a second skin. On the dance floor, an orchestra played something old and sweeping. Nathan extended his hand. "May I?" I arched an eyebrow. "Is that for the cameras?" "Not anymore." I placed my hand in his. He guided me into the slow waltz, his palm firm at my waist, his other hand holding mine carefully. We moved in circles under the ribcage of a giant blue whale suspended above us. People watched. People always watched. But for once, I didn't feel like I was performing. I felt like I was breathing. "You're thinking too loudly," he murmured. "I'm trying not to. Tell me what you're thinking." "That this is a terrible idea," I said honestly. "That I'm going to mess this up. That I don't know how to be someone's wife for real." His thumb brushed a tiny path across my hand. "You don't have to know. You just have to be you." That's too simple. It's only simple because we make it complicated. I spent years hating you. I know. And now I don't. He was quiet. "Do you know why?" "Because you're not who I thought you were." "And who did you think I was?" he asked gently. I swallowed. "Someone who'd always choose himself." He nodded slowly. "I did. Until you." The sincerity in his voice startled air out of me. My step faltered. He steadied me without breaking rhythm. "I'm not sure I deserve that," I whispered. "Deserve isn't the point," he said. "It's not a reward. It's a fact." We danced another minute in silence. Then I said, "Nathan?" "Say my name again." He looked down at me, surprised. "Eleanor." The way he said it, soft, certain, made my whole body warm. I did something reckless then. I lifted on my toes and kissed him. It wasn't a polished, camera-ready kiss. It was small and real, and a bit clumsy because I was nervous. His breath caught. His hands tightened at my waist like he was afraid I'd disappear. When I pulled back, his eyes looked stunned, like he'd been handed a miracle he didn't expect to keep. "Well," I said, cheeks flaming. "There goes the enemy thing." He laughed under his breath, forehead touching mine. "I was never your enemy, Eleanor. Just your mirror." The words hit deep. I leaned into him, trying to accept that maybe the war had always been in me, not between us. We didn't tell anyone right away. Not my parents, not his partners, not even Oliver. We protected the fragile thing we were building like a secret garden. But secrets have a way of becoming visible in the way you look at someone, in the softness of a hand on a back, in the quiet confidence of shared spaces. People noticed, of course. They always do. Mum noticed first. She always did. It happened at Christmas, when we spent the holiday at my parents' flat, now safer and brighter. Mum insisted on cooking enough food for a small army, and Nathan quietly helped her, chopping vegetables with the careful focus of a man who'd learned to do things right the first time. I watched them from the living room where Dad and Oliver were debating football loudly. At one point, Mum called me into the kitchen. She handed me a spoon. "Taste this." I did. "Perfect." She smiled. Then her eyes softened to that dangerous mother look that sees too much. "You're happy," she said quietly. Not as a question. I froze. "Mum." "No, listen." She wiped her hands on her apron, then cupped my cheek. "I don't need to know the timeline. I don't care about the gossip. I just need to know if you're okay. If he's kind." I looked over her shoulder at Nathan, who was humming to himself while he stirred gravy, as if he belonged in this room. "He's kind," I said honestly. "And are you happy?" I thought of the contract. Of New York. Of his confession. Of the soup in the fridge. Of the way his hand had found mine under the table when Dad told a terrible joke. I swallowed. "I'm getting there," I said. Mum smiled, and I saw relief in it. That's all I ever wanted. Later that night, when everyone was in a post-dinner haze, Nathan and I slipped onto the balcony with mugs of cocoa. London was cold and starless, but the air smelled like chimney smoke and pine. We stood shoulder to shoulder, looking at the city that had once felt like a cage and now felt like a strange kind of home. "I think she knows," I said softly. He nodded. "She's very perceptive. She didn't ask about the contract. She doesn't need to." He glanced at me. "Do you regret not telling them?" "Sometimes." But I couldn't bear them seeing it as a sacrifice. It wasn't only a sacrifice. I looked at him. Wasn't it? He smiled faintly. It was a choice. And in a way, it saved me too.
How?
I was heading toward a life that looked impressive and felt empty. He took a breath. Then you walked into my office with fury in your eyes and your family's survival on your shoulders. You reminded me what it feels like to want something that isn't just status. My throat tightened. "You're doing that thing again." "What thing?" "Making me feel like I matter too much." "You do matter too much," he said simply. "To me." I leaned my head against his shoulder. "That's terrifying." "I know."
His arm slid around me.
"But I'm not going anywhere." "Don't promise things you can't guarantee." "I can guarantee this." He kissed the top of my head. "If you ever want to leave, I'll let you. If you ever want to stay, I'll be grateful." I turned to face him. "You know, for a man who started this with a marriage contract, you're ridiculously sentimental." He arched one eyebrow. "You married me to save your family. I fell for you. I think we're both guilty of inconvenient emotions." I laughed. "True. We went into the new year like that, carefully, honestly, trying to write a story on top of the old one without ripping the pages. We argued sometimes, because love doesn't erase personality. I got mad when he worked too late and forgot to rest. He got mad when I took extra shifts without telling him, pretending I still carried the financial world alone. We learned each other in real time, not by assumption. He learned that my silence didn't mean peace, it meant overload. I learned that his distance sometimes meant fear, not arrogance. One night in March, the press ran a piece about Hart's surprising domestic bliss, with photos of us leaving a charity event hand in hand. The tone was soft, even approving. I should have been relieved. Instead, I felt a fresh spike of panic. "They think it's real," I said to Nathan in the kitchen, phone in hand. "It is real," he said quietly. "No, I mean," I gestured helplessly. "They think it's a fairy tale." He stepped closer. "Do you need to pull back?" I shook my head quickly.
"No."
"I just hate feeling watched." "Me too." "We could end this," I blurted. "The contract has a clause. If you want a clean break, we can plan it, we can tell people it didn't work, we can." He studied me. "Do you want to end it?" The question lodged right where my fear lived. I searched myself honestly.
"No."
"Then stop trying to outrun the happiness." His voice was gentle but firm. "It's allowed to exist, Eleanor." I exhaled shakily. "I don't trust it." "I know. You grew up with love tied to survival. It taught you to be cautious." He paused. "But this isn't survival anymore. It's a choice we keep making." The steadiness in his eyes made something settle in me. "Not fully. Not forever. But enough." "Okay," I whispered. "Okay," he echoed and kissed me, slow and careful, like he was still giving me a chance to say no. We hit our 2-year mark on a rainy Thursday in late spring. There was no fanfare. No witnesses. We both knew what the date meant, and the quiet around it felt almost sacred. That morning, I found an envelope on the kitchen counter with my name on it. My stomach lurched. I picked it up and stared at it like it might bite. Nathan came out of his office in sleeves and bare feet, hair rumpled in a way that still surprised me. "You found it. What is this?" My voice was thin. He poured coffee calmly. "The divorce papers." I blinked. You already filed them?"
"No."
"They're drafted." Ready if you want them. I set the envelope down like it was hot. Why would you do that? Because today marks our contractual end. He finally looked at me, expression open. I promised you you'd never be trapped. This is me keeping that promise. My throat tightened. Do you want a divorce? He shook his head. No. Then why?